The world was reset 12,000 years ago. New Zealand still has one of the pieces of the civilization that was lost. There's a wall in the Kaimanawa Forest, and it belongs to the civilization that was here before the Younger Dryas. The wall was known to local Māori long before it became a national argument. It sits in the Kaimanawa Ranges in the central North Island, about an hour south of Taupo. What's visible above ground is roughly 3 metres high, around 20 metres long, large, flat-faced basalt blocks, stacked in tight horizontal courses. No mortar, no randomness. The joints are clean, the faces are flat, and the corners are square. It looks like the base of something much larger that isn't there anymore. The official position, delivered after a government investigation in the 1990s, is that it's all natural. Ignimbrite, a volcanic rock that sometimes fractures in roughly rectangular patterns. Case closed, nothing to see. The problem is that ignimbrite doesn't typically self-assemble into horizontal courses with consistent block sizes and dressed faces. The official answer explains the material. It doesn't explain the structure. I know how this sounds. I know the word people reach for. And I'm not asking you to believe anything yet. I'm asking you to stay with me and stay with the evidence. Because by the time we come back to this wall, the question won't be whether it's possible. It'll be why it took this long to take it seriously. The Younger Dryas was a sudden, catastrophic climate event roughly 12,000 years ago, triggered by comet impacts, fire, floods, and a rapid collapse in global temperatures that broke the civilization that built places like Egypt, Göbekli Tepe, the stone circles, and the wider network we're still finding in pieces. The Kaimanawa Wall is a fragment of what that world left behind. A section that stayed in the ground while the rest of the structure went under forest, water, ash, earth, and time. New Zealand belongs in this story as one of the places where a surviving fragment of that system is still sitting in stone. Put that wall beside Giza, Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, Adam's Calendar, the South African stone circles, Yonaguni, Atlantis, old maps, drowned coastlines, and the Amazon. And the same pattern keeps showing up. Pieces of a connected system. Technology nobody knows how to use anymore because the people who built it are gone. I'm Anthony, this is Southern Static. Some stories are crimes, some are hauntings, some are legends, and some sit in the static between all three. Tonight, we're going behind the wall. New Zealand sits on Zealandia, and most of Zealandia is underwater. When the water came up after the Younger Dryas and the coastlines changed, the sea took the evidence first. Harbours, coastal settlements, low-lying land, roots near the water. So when a wall turns up inland on the exposed edge of a drowned continent, it fits exactly where a surviving fragment should be. And New Zealand wasn't too remote for any of this. That idea only works if you treat the ocean as a barrier. The Pacific was a highway. Stars, swells, birds, currents, memory, training, navigation technology. It doesn't need engines or satellites to be real technology. New Zealand wasn't just on the map, New Zealand was on the road. The clearest machine in that network is Giza. The Great Pyramid is the best surviving piece of machinery from the civilization before the Younger Dryas. The shape, the mass, the alignment, the internal spaces, the shafts, the way it sits on that plateau, all of it has purpose running through it. Ramps and ropes don't close that problem. They give people a picture they can hold in their heads, but they don't explain the precision, the geometry, the weight, the internal design, or why the whole structure reads like a working system. The pyramid's dead hardware. The stone survived, but the operating knowledge died with the civilization around it. Strip away the people who knew how to use it, the wider network, the power, the source, the purpose, and the machine becomes a mystery. A future civilization finding a power station with no grid would probably call it a temple. The object stays behind, but the system that made it useful is gone. That's Giza. The machine is still standing. The world that switched it on is gone. The Sphinx carries two stories in one body, and the body is the important one. The erosion on the base isn't wind erosion, it's water erosion. Deep vertical channels carved by heavy rainfall. The kind that hasn't fallen in that region since well before 5000 BC. Geologist Robert Schoch made the case from the physical evidence. The weathering pattern on the body is consistent with thousands of years of heavy rain, which puts the original construction far earlier than any official dating allows. The head is the later claim, a newer civilization's way of putting its name on something it found and didn't fully understand. Sphinx is an older monument wearing a newer face, and the body tells the real age. Giza has all that running right through it. The pyramid is old technology sitting in plain sight. The Sphinx is older still. Both of them point back to a civilization that was long established before the reset. Göbekli Tepe isn't the beginning of civilization. It's what survived from the one before. The exposed site at Göbekli Tepe shows organised, confident knowledge. Huge T-shaped pillars, carved animals, circular enclosures, repeated symbols, planned spaces, stonework cut with real precision. This isn't people fumbling into complexity for the first time. This is people working inside a system that already existed. The visible site is also only part of what's there. The hill was buried and layered over, so the deeper you go, the older the story gets. The earlier version of Göbekli Tepe is still down there. When it comes up, it won't push the timeline back a little. It'll completely break it. Karahan Tepe, Göbekli Tepe, Sayburk and the wider Tas-Tepala region are all in the same system spread across the same landscape. Shared symbols, shared architecture, shared stone language, shared purpose across distances. That's people working from the same body of knowledge, not separate groups accidentally landing on similar ideas. Karahan Tepe feels like the stone itself was part of the function. Spaces cut into bedrock, human imagery, animal forms, chambers shaped for movement, sound and directed attention. Calling all of that ritual is the easy answer. It's the label people reach for when the function's been forgotten. These places could carry meaning and still have a job. The civilization before the Younger Dryas didn't need to separate technology from belief the way we do now. Karahan Tepe and Tas-Tepala are buried pieces of the same system. Ancient maps carry memory. Routes, coastlines, copied knowledge. Pieces of information that outlive the people who first recorded them. The Periodis map belongs here because it reads like copied memory. Geography passed forward through later hands after the original source was gone. The southern coastline is the part that matters. Whatever that lower section represents, Antarctica before the ice, a drowned coastline, knowledge no 16th century map maker should have had. It sits in the map as evidence that something older came through in fragments. Not a solved mystery, inherited geography that points back further than the official story allows. A destroyed civilization leaves damaged records, copies of copies, strange coastlines, missing labels, information without instructions. That's what old maps become after a reset. Scraps of a larger memory that nobody knows how to read in full anymore. And maps are just the paper version. The same memory survives in stone, in story, and the shape of a building that outlasted everyone who knew what it was for. Which brings us to the story that carries all of it. That story is Atlantis. And it belongs here not because it's literally true, but because it carries the right shape. A powerful maritime civilization tied to water, destroyed quickly, remembered through story. Strip away the cartoon version and the shape underneath still holds. Advanced civilization, water destruction, survivors, warning. A world goes under. The survivors remember it, their children inherit the memory. And after enough generations, the memory becomes myth. But the shape stays alive because people keep telling the story. Atlantis is another echo of the reset, passed forward through culture long after the packs behind it were gone. But here's what Atlantis does for this story. Once you accept that drowned civilization survivors' memory, you start looking at the water differently. And when you look at the water, you find Yonaguni. Yonaguni sits exactly where evidence from a drowned coastline should sit. Underwater, broken, shifted. Hard to study and easy to dismiss. The terraces, steps, edge and platforms keep pulling the same question back into view. What does it look like when something structured ends up underwater after thousands of years of sea level change in time? The Amazon is the land version. Whole engineered landscapes sat under the forest while people called it wilderness. LiDAR pulled roads, platforms, earthworks and settlement geometry out from under the canopy. The empty forest was never empty. That's how evidence disappears. It goes underwater, it goes under forest. It gets reused, buried, mislabeled, ignored and walked past. The Amazon hid whole landscapes. The ocean hides whole coastlines. The Kaimanawa bush can hide a wall, and all of it points to the same thing. We've been looking for the civilization in the wrong places at the wrong depth, with the wrong assumptions about what counts as evidence. Adam's calendar is a node, and the South African stone circles are the infrastructure built around it. Thousands of stone circles spread across the landscape. That's scale, placement, purpose and system, a network built in stone, across a terrain over a long time, by people who knew exactly what they were building. Pull the map back and the pattern runs through Africa. Adam's calendar, Great Zimbabwe, Giza, connected by placement, alignment, stone and distance. The stone circles belong to the same technology as the pyramids. The chambers or enclosures are acoustically tuned. They resonate at specific frequencies, the same way the pyramid's internal spaces do. Both are precisely orientated to the solstices and cardinal points. Both are built at a scale that only makes sense as part of a wider network. The civilization before the Younger Dryas used stone to interact with landscape, sound and geography in ways we can measure but we haven't reproduced. The hardware's still in the ground. The knowledge isn't. And that's the real problem. Not that the evidence is missing. The evidence is everywhere. The problem is that we don't recognize it for what it is. Because modern people recognize technology when it looks like wires, screens, batteries, satellites, steel and circuits. The earlier civilization used stone, geometry, alignment, sound, resonance, water, mass and landscape scale placement. Later people called it ritual because the function was gone and nobody left a manual. We looked at the evidence and filed it under religion, under mystery, under folklore, and kept walking. A dead phone found 12,000 years from now would be misread immediately. No charger, no satellites, no internet, no factory, no power grid. Nobody left who knows what it was made for. People would build stories around the object because the system that made it useful would be gone. That's the pyramids. That's the stone circles. That's the alignments. The hardware survived in pieces. The operating system died with the people who knew how to run it. The Younger Dryas reset the world. Coastlines ripped apart. Land burned. Temperatures crashed. Water and ice moved across the landscape with enough force to carve it apart, shift boulders and stripped surfaces back to bare rock. The scars are so large that they barely make sense from the ground. Look at the scablands. So when people ask where the buildings are, the answer is simple. Gone. A catastrophe like that leaves foundations, underwater sites, broken stones, scattered fragments. Damaged stories and whatever happened to be buried deep enough, all lucky enough to survive. The survivors were whoever made it through. Catastrophe doesn't select the best engineers, builders, surgeons, astronomers. It leaves whoever happens to still be alive. Think about our world collapsing right now, tomorrow. 95% of people gone. Boom. Survivors would still remember phones, planes, hospitals, electricity. All of it. Remembering those things wouldn't mean they could rebuild any of them. I can use a phone. I certainly couldn't build one from scratch. I know hospitals save lives. I can't manufacture the medicines, run the machines, or hold any of the systems together. But scraps would survive. Clean water matters. Infection, fire, shelter, food storage. Stories about what the world used to be matter. That's how it carries forward. Not cleanly, not intact, but in pieces. Stories that kept their shape after the facts behind them were gone. Rituals where nobody remembers their original function. That's what came out of the other side of the Younger Dryas. Not civilization restarting from zero. Fragments of something that already existed, trying to stay alive. Kaimanawa Wall is one of those fragments. After Giza, the Sphinx, Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, the maps, Atlantis, Yonaguni, the Amazon, Adam's calendar and the stone circles, a wall in the New Zealand bush is exactly the kind of thing that should still be here. A lower wall, a foundation edge, a retaining line, a surviving piece of infrastructure left behind after the rest was smashed, buried, drowned or forgotten. The rest of it's gone because 12,000 years is brutal. Forest covers stone, water buries coastlines, earthquakes shift the ground. People reuse whatever they find, build over it, forget what was there. The Kaimanawa Wall is a fragment, and fragments are what make it through when a wall gets broken. Put the pieces beside each other and the story won't leave you alone. One connected system, built in stone across thousands of kilometres. And then the Younger Dryas hit. The system broke and the people who knew how to operate it were mostly gone. What survived came through damaged. Pieces of structures, copied maps, stories that kept their shape after the facts behind them were gone. And technology later civilizations found but could no longer operate. The machine survived in pieces, but the knowledge did not. That's why the Kaimanawa Wall matters. Put it beside the machinery at Giza, the layered Sphinx, the buried system at Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, the stone circle infrastructure, the copied maps, the drowned places, that forest hidden geometry, and the old flood memories, and it becomes part of the pattern. A wall in the New Zealand bush, still standing, still waiting, after 12,000 years. I'm Anthony. This is Southern Static. Stay safe and stay out of the static.